Hello, so today we are going to focus on our hand stitches, and the first hand stitch we are going to do is the even baste, and then we will do the uneven baste. Basting is when we are holding together layers of fabric with a temporary stitch, and that's the focus of this, a temporary stitch. They have different purposes for why we might choose one over the other. Sometimes it's for efficiency and speed, but in general we will use these to hold up hems, maybe for a rehearsal, or we just need to hold something together until we put the permanent stitching in. So when we are doing this, we're going to be using a couple of specific tools. One is going to be, we have our needles. I'm using a Lance Milliner's 10. This has a very small eye, so it's not something beginning stitchers usually want to use. I would recommend size 9 sharp for a beginning stitcher. We have our fabric, and I do have 2 layers of fabric here since we are basting, and that generally indicates that we are putting 2 layers together. We also have our thread, and I'm just using some dual duty Coats & Clark dark thread so that we can see our stitching. And of course I have my scissors, and you can either use some wax, beeswax, or you can use a thread conditioner like Thread Heaven, which is my preferred one. Both of them have their purposes. Wax can actually help strengthen your thread as well if you're looking for a stronger thread, but for today's purposes we're going to use Thread Heaven, and it is just like a soft material, very wax-like, and I'm just going to, I've already pre-cut my thread. I'm going to run this through there one time, and then I just slide the thread through my fingers to make sure there's not any extra residue on there. Now with this stitch, we actually, because it is temporary, we are not going to use an actual knot. We are going to do something called a tailor tack. So do not knot your thread. The other thing we're going to do, just to help us along our sample here, is I'm going to use one of my friction markers. Friction markers are nice because when you apply heat, they disappear. And I've kept it light so that we can see the thread on top of that. So starting, I have my 2 threads here. I'm going to tailor tack first. So when we're tailor tacking, this is just a temporary way to knot the thread without actually putting a physical knot in. So as you can see, I took my first stitch and I've left what we call a tail. So this can be moved back and forth. And you want to leave a long tail on it when you're doing this kind of tacking. So I am now going to stitch exactly over where I was before. And then I'm going to do it again. I like to do it at least 2 or 3 times, and you can see that then when I pull this, it pulls the base of the thread, but it's not going to pull the thread out. It's in essence a knot. So I want to keep that nice and flat. When we're basting, we don't want to have it be uneven. So the next step is, this is an even baste. That means our stitches are all of even length. So I'm going to come here about 1/2 inch, go into the fabric, and then I'm going to come out of the fabric about 1/2 inch further down on my line. And then I'm going to come in about 1/2 inch and then out. Generally, you do not need to measure this. This is something that is temporary and should be organic, and to some extent. The goal is that the spaces between the stitches is equal to the length of the stitch. So I am just going to proceed down the length of my fabric. So you can see here that the distance from here to here is equal to the distance from here to here. Now please be careful when you're doing this that you don't pull your thread too tight that it causes it to pucker. And we're not going to be putting in any tailor tacks along the way or anything that's going to act as a knot, because we want to be able to remove this very quickly when it is done. When we get to the end, we are going to take one last stitch, and then I'm going to take a tailor tack here. So I'm going to stitch the front over that 2 times. and then I'm going to trim this. And there is our even. Now if I flip this over, it should look the same. So that is our even baste. Tune into the next video, which is the uneven baste.